Hi, I'm Mark Wilkinson, and this is Keith Devon, and we're both WordPress developers from an agency called Highrise Digital.
And tonight we're going to give a presentation about how we built the Kim Bolton School website using the full site editor, some of the trials and tribulations of that process, and what we learned along the way.
My name's Mark Wilkinson. I'm here tonight with Keith Devon. We form the duo at Highrise Digital. We are a WordPress agency. We also have a few products, and we build various websites for various people. And this is one of the sites that we've recently built using WordPress's full site editing capabilities. It was our first website that we used this, I want to say new stuff, but it's probably been actually around for quite a long time. But it's our first dabble into using this technology. Is technology the right word? I'm not sure, but anyway. So it's basically a bit of a case study about what we did, how we built it. Hopefully you can find some interesting facts in there and things that you might want to take forward with your own builds. So that's the website. That's the homepage. Just to give you an idea, if you want to view it, it's kimboltonschool.com. And that's what I think that's what it currently looks like, or it certainly was when we took the screenshot. It has changed once or twice in the last few months. And as I said, it's built with full site editing using the block editor in WordPress. So what are we going to talk about in this particular talk? We're going to cover the sort of setup that we did. How did we set this project up that was maybe slightly different to a regular WordPress setup, but maybe what you're used to. So what we set up differently. We're going to look at some of the specific features that we implemented in this project that were perhaps slightly different and specific to full site editing and using the block editor. We could literally talk for like 4 hours on all of the stuff we did. So we are going to skim across quite a few things. So if you have specific questions, if you're coming out later to the social, do ask us about the site. We'll happily talk to you about it. And then finally, we're just going to cover some advice that we think is good advice for if you want to decide to look at full site editing and using the block editor and how you might go about that. So we'll start with setup. I'll hand you to Keith.
Hi. So just the very basics of how we kind of set the theme up. It's a very, very standard WordPress theme in the block world. So you can see all the kind of usual stuff in there. We've got our style.css, theme.json file. We've got an assets directory, parts, patterns, templates. It's all pretty standard, functions.php files. So nothing super unusual about it. It's all fairly standard stuff. But there's a couple of things I just wanted to talk about, specifically around the CSS. So quite often on new projects, I'm a CSS guy. It's my kind of true love in the web world. And on most projects, I want to try out something new. And on this project, I actually decided I wanted to go back in time to a world before preprocessors. So I thought I'm just going to give this a go and see what I can do with native CSS these days, which was great. It was really refreshing. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed not having a build process to worry about. But I did make one fairly major mistake in that I thought CSS nesting was really well supported, and it isn't, it turns out. So we found out after the project was launched, and I needed to undo all my nested CSS. So that was very painful. So learn that lesson from my mistake, please. The other little thing here was just the way we kind of handled block CSS. Mark wrote a clever bit of code, which we don't have time to kind of fully get into. But it basically just meant that I could, anytime I wanted to write CSS specific to a block, I just added that to our blocks directory, so like core/list.css, and it automatically gets picked up and then queued. So that was just a really nice little process for me. So this is it. So there's my blocks directory with my CSS files there. So anytime I just wrote one and it automatically gets queued for me. So that was kind of cool. Typography and spacing. So this is the stuff I always start with on a new build. Typography is kind of the basis of websites for me. And a tool that I've been using quite a lot recently is utopia.fyi. This is by the people at Clear Left, I believe. and it is as it says, a fluid type scale calculator. So basically what that means is that it is responsive fluid typography. So as the viewport gets bigger, your fonts get bigger. But what I really like about this is the font scales that you can put in. So if you like a harmonious typographic hierarchy, it even calls the minor thirds and major thirds here and all this kind of stuff. So on a small screen, you can imagine, or sorry, we'll start with desktop. On a big screen, you might want a 60 pixel heading. Looks great on desktop, looks terrible on a mobile. So this is a way that you could, like, fluid typography is a way that you can kind of handle that. And this is just a great tool. So it spits out, so you set up all your presets here. So the width of the minimum viewport, the maximum viewport, the base font size at each, and the type scale at each. And then it gives you an example of what your typographic hierarchy is going to look like with all the pixel sizes. And you can just resize that screen and it'll update. And then it generates the CSS for you. So I've been using this for a while, but then what actually happened is that, so yeah, this is CSS it generates. So it's a bunch of custom properties that you can use. Then WordPress kind of has its own system for this. So I used to just put those custom properties directly into the size, where it says size 0.7.234 rem there. That's where I would put my custom property, but I've since used WordPress's own fluid version for this. But it also, the Utopia tool also generates spacing, like fluid spacing rules, and I find these really useful. And it's exactly the same type of system. And again, within your Theme.json file, you can plug in your custom properties like this, and then you've got nice fluid responsive spacing rules. Speaking of spacing rules, back in the very, very early days of the block editor, before we had the dimensions panel, so before we had controls for padding and margins and things like that, themes had to take care of all of that stuff out of the box. And that was actually a world that I quite enjoyed, because I could make sure all that stuff looked the way I wanted it to look. And then so for example, I'll just give a little example of that. So, sorry, I'll wind back. And then the dimensions panel comes in and I'm kind of thrown. I'm like, how does that work with the default spacing rules? So what I mean by smart spacing rules here is, for example, in a theme without these rules, if I create a bunch of group blocks with headings inside, I give them background colors and they've got different widths. So we've got the default width, wide width, 2 full widths. That isn't how anybody wants their website to actually look in the end. They're going to want to add padding and margin to that, but you don't want them to have to do that every time themselves on each individual block. So what I want it to look like is potentially something like this. So whenever I add background color to a default width group, it gets a little bit of padding and a little bit of margin. Maybe a wide group has a bit more padding and a bit more margin. Maybe 2 full width blocks beside each other has no space in between. So these are the kind of like smart defaults that I want in a theme. But I thought that kind of clashed with this new dimensions panel world. But it turns out it doesn't. And this is just a little revelation for me, actually, that we could have both of these things. So now our themes have the smart defaults cooked in, but you can override them with the dimensions panel. So it really is the best of both worlds. So that was a bit of a game changer for me. So now we have user-friendly defaults, which saves time, but they're overridable if you need to for any particular reason. Over to Mark.
So one of the things we want to do is disallow some of the blocks. WordPress comes with loads of blocks. There's probably like 50 odd blocks, which is quite confusing for clients because they don't use a lot of the blocks. They don't really understand what they are. So one of the things we can do is disallow them, and it's really relatively easy to do with PHP, which is nice. I like PHP. So we've got an array at the top, which is which blocks do you want to remove. So core verse is one of the blocks we want to get rid of. I'm not quite sure why. You'd need a very specific site to use a verse block, probably. So we've got quite a lot of blocks. I think we disallow about 12 or so blocks that the customer is not really going to use or doesn't understand how to do. So that sort of code easily does that. If you we'll put these slides up on somewhere, so you don't have to rush to copy these down or anything. So I think we've removed sort of like code blocks, calendar, archives, comments, just stuff that the client's not going to need to get them out of the way. So that's a really easy way. You can put that in your theme, or you can create a little plugin and you can put that in there as well, depending on how you're going to set up your site. WordPress also comes with some block variations. So a good example here is the embed block comes with lots of variations for different types of embed. So you get YouTube, Vimeo, you name it. There's loads of them in there. And again, sometimes that can be quite confusing. Our client was only using YouTube. That's where they put all their videos. So why keep the other ones in the list, just confusing matters? So we can remove those as well. To do that, you need to do that in JavaScript. So you'd need to enqueue a JavaScript file. Relatively straightforward. The action that you'd need to use is enqueue block editor attets. That's at the bottom line. And that will make sure your JavaScript file loads when the block editor is being used. And then insert your JavaScript file. A little bit of JavaScript. Again, we've got an array of the variations that is that an array or is that an object? I think it's an array that we want to remove. And then the next bit sort of removes them. And again, I think we've put that into our theme, into the sort of the theme files, so that can get rid of those. I think you need to do that in JavaScript rather than in PHP. WordPress also uses some default styles of blocks out the box. So the obvious one of those is the image block. By default comes with like a rounded style, and it might have another one, I can't remember, but it certainly has a rounded style. It wasn't appropriate for our work, so you'd need to remove that as well. And again, some JavaScript to do that. So here the image block rounded is removed. The button block also comes with a fill and outline. I think we were using primary, secondary type of styles for those, so they were getting rid of. And then the table block also has some different options that you might want to remove as well. So that's easily done. Just cleans things up, makes it easy for the client to understand what's going on.
So block styles, I love block styles, again, because I'm a CSS guy, and basically what adding a block style does is add a CSS class to a block, basically what it does. So what I'm talking about with block styles is the panel on the right-hand side where it says styles. So I've got a list block here, and I have 3 different styles to choose from: default, no bullets, and separated. So we've registered our block styles. No bullets and separated are custom to this particular theme, to this particular build. And you can see just how easy it is to switch between different styles of things. And because it's basically all in CSS, it makes my life really, really easy. This is another example. This is the media and text block with 4 different styles: the default style, the offset, numbered, offset, and bordered. Super easy for the client just to switch between those styles. They don't need to fiddle about with background colors and padding and all that kind of stuff. They don't need to do any of that. That just works. And this is one that I really liked. I needed one of those statistics counter things where it's when it scrolls into view, the number kind of counts up. And I just did that with the block style. So I just registered a counter style for the paragraph block, and the rest of it's just in JavaScript. It looks for the CSS class that's added, sorry, the class that's added, and it does this. So you'll have seen this kind of thing before. But that's all I had to do, is to register the style and then do the rest of it with JavaScript. And it's a really nice UI for the client. That was a real win.
So like most projects, we used some plugins to make our life easier. So I'm just going to look at some of these plugins. So one of the ones we use, shameless plug, this one of our plugins, is Better Court Video Embeds. What this does is if you embed a video from a service such as YouTube or Vimeo, it prevents all the YouTube scripts loading before they actually interact with the video. So it's just a bit nice and speeds things up. So go and have a look at that if you're interested in that sort of stuff. We used a create block theme, which allows you to kind of do stuff in the editor, but then export it back to the theme files so that you can version control it. So once you've created one of the templates in the full site editor, you can then export it back into the to your theme, and then that works quite well. There was 1 or 2 issues we had with that with patterns. I'm not sure whether I'm going to cover that in a minute, but it certainly caused a few problems. The other one is the block visibility plugin from Nick Diego. That allows you to show and hide blocks based on various different parameters. Mobile, tablet, screen size is a good one. You can do things like show this block until a certain date. So it's a really powerful plugin. Recommend you check that out if you're using the block editor to build your sites with. The icon block, really simple. It has a little suite of icons that you can pull in and use. I think you can also add your own icons if you've got a custom icon set, and it's just a block that allows you to put an icon into a page or a post or whatever you're using. So that was a useful one in this instance. There was a few instances where that was useful. We made use of this plugin called Advanced Columns. We had a specific section on the site. I think it's on the home page. There's like a grid of different features pulling in posts and videos and other media things. And this Advanced Columns plugin is good for that. Go and check it out. This one isn't on WordPress.org. It's again by Nick Diego. Does a lot of stuff in the block editor. This is called Enabled Linked Groups. You'll find it on GitHub. If you search for it, you'll find it. And it enables you to add a link to a group. So you can, let's say you have a card, and you can just link the whole card rather than having to link the individual elements of it. So that's quite nice, and was useful in our scenario. Patterns, Keith.
Yeah, onto patterns. So I feel like patterns are they're a major part of the full site editing kind of world, and they're a really important and brilliant part of it, but also can be super frustrating at times. We use them pretty heavily on this site, as you'll see in a second. There's kind of two main pattern types, synced and unsynced. So synced used to be called reusable blocks, and that's where you get a collection of blocks together, you turn it into a pattern, and then anytime you edit that pattern, that change is across the whole site, everywhere that pattern's used. And then unsynced patterns, which is just a collection of blocks that are dumped on a page, and then you just edit them and they're their own standalone thing. But there's actually kind of two more, I think. There's synced overridable patterns, which are like the synced patterns, but with some elements that are overridable. So again, as a whole, they can be controlled centrally, but maybe you can change a bit of text or you can change an image. These are super cool, but kind of not quite there yet. And then there's semantic patterns, which I won't talk about at all. I think that's what they are, which are basically template parts like headers and footers. Someone can correct me later if they need to. Patterns were used loads on this website, so we created a whole load of them for the client to use, and it was really cool to see the client actually creating loads of their own after we'd kind of finished our work. So they do work. So there's a few examples here. I mean, there were literally, I don't know, about 70 or something on this project. These are actually some of the ones that the clients created, like the maps one. I didn't build that. They've done that. And you can see that is just going to click forward. That one is synced. So it's got this little purple diamond icon beside it, which means it's a synced pattern. So they can use that across the website and then edit it centrally, which they love. And we've got handbook contents, we've got contact details, there's event things, there's loads. We use them a lot. So I found that there's like certain opportunities available with patterns. Like Mark said, we use the Create Block Theme plugin to save them to the theme, which was really, really cool. It makes building pages really fast, and it was really cool to watch our client build their own pages using all the patterns that we built, and like I said, build their own patterns. Clients love synced patterns especially if they've come from outside of WordPress. Being able to edit content kind of centrally, sort of globally, is mind-blowing to them. So that's a massive win. And then, like I say, synced overridable patterns could be really great, and we did use them quite a lot. But patterns have problems too. So like Mark mentioned, the Create Block Theme plugin can sort of accidentally delete all of your patterns if you don't have something. This is something that Nick, you pointed out to me, didn't you? Can you remember what the setting was? Can you remember? I can't. Yeah. Yeah. And they can just vanish, essentially. Yeah.
I think it is a quite specific use case, isn't it? But just a word of warning, that's all.
Yeah. I would say that the pattern UI is confusing. They can be edited in like loads of different places, and the UI for the editing experience isn't always the same. So it's a bit of a confusing thing, and some of the terminology around it, like synced and unsynced and overridable and all this stuff. So there's still challenges there. And like I said, the synced overridable patterns are quite limited still. So there's only a certain number of things that can be overridden. I would love to see that expanded soon because the concept of it is super, super powerful. Onto some of the features of the build. Who's first? Oh, it's me first. Yeah. This section nav. So you can see on the left-hand side of the web page here, we have an admissions navigation section, and it is a top-level page, and then it's child pages, and then as you sort of dig down into the child pages, you can see there's like further child pages, and it gives you a sense of where you are. So this was a requirement right from the start of the project, and we didn't quite know how we were going to build it. It's one of those things that seemed really obvious at the start, like easy at the start, and then we kind of dug into it. It's like, yeah, I'm not actually sure how we're gonna deliver this. So the requirements were that it was a navigation for all the ancestor and descendant pages of whatever page that you're on. It automatically updated, so it's not like a menu that you go and edit independently. When you add a page to that structure, it automatically gets added. And it's super easy just to add to any page on the website. So those are kind of the requirements. This is what we came up with, which I think actually ended up working really well. We used the page list block, and we used that with no parent page selected. So it outputs the whole page tree structure of the website on every page, everywhere it's used. We then added a class using the additional CSS classes. And then we just showed or hid things with CSS because the markup for that has all the classes that you need, whether it's current page menu item or an ancestor or a child. It's got all the classes built in just to show the ones that we needed at any point. And the solution was just to make that whole thing a pattern so that the client didn't need to go and add the class to the additional CSS classes. So this is just a little bit of example CSS. So you can see at the top here, I'm hiding everything basically in the menu. And then underneath, I'm showing the items that are either the current item or the current menu ancestors. So you're just displaying those as block. And then there's also the subsections. So again, I'm kind of hiding all the subsections with display none, and then just showing the ones that are relevant. So we thought this was quite a clever solution. So you can just drop that on any page of the website and it works. So that was kind of cool. Mark, card block.
So one of the requirements of the site when we had the designs delivered to us was that the designs were quite what we called card heavy. They had a lots of card content in them. And card, you can see some examples on here. So a card is usually an image, some text, a link, an icon, a mixture of those things. And there's some different types of these cards. So top left, you can see there's like an overlay. Middle, you've got like a complete color overlay of a card. And then the bottom is like a slightly different again. They're all essentially the same thing, but they're just displayed in different ways. So it was how we're going to deliver this. There was lots of options. We could use patterns. We could use synced overridable patterns. We could do all sorts of things. And we tried lots of things, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, it was easier just to build custom block to allow the client to do these as easily as possible. So that's what we did. It allowed us to give them all the options that they needed really easily so they could understand what to edit and what content to put in. And also allowed us to change things easily, if necessary, globally across the site. So if that purple that you saw in the top left needed to change to a different color, it was easy just to override that. So that's what the block looks like in the back end. You get different options. It can pull content from the website, so it can pull like the contents of a page and show the title with the featured image, or they can just override the image or override the text. That was quite nice. We used ACF to deliver the custom block functionality. That's nice and easy to build custom blocks with. So if you want to delve into custom blocks, I'd recommend having a look at that if you're not comfortable with JavaScript. And that's how we built the sort of card facilities. Do you want to cover animations?
Well,
I think we should. We've got about 6 minutes, I think. So
really? Okay. This was going to be the section we cut if we were running out of time, but I think we'll just whiz through it.
Squeeze it in.
So animations on the website, we had some ideas around this. I like subtle animations. I don't like websites where things are flying in at all different angles and all different types of animations. So I wanted them to be subtle. I wanted them to be consistent. And I also wanted them to be automatic. I didn't want the client to have a UI for animations, to have to think about adding animations when they're editing the content of the site. So those were the kind of requirements that kind of I set up. And the way I've done it works pretty well. I've got a intersection observer here in JavaScript, which basically detects when something comes into view on a page. And all I've done is set up a list at the top here of the queries, the query selectors of elements that I want to add some kind of animation to, or I want to add animation to their children somewhere on the site. So you can see I've got when the columns block scrolls into view, I want something to happen. When the gallery block scrolls into view, when the pop-up card block scrolls into view, I want something to happen. And the way I'm doing that is just, again, adding a class. So when the columns block scrolls in, it gets a class added to it called scrolled in. So that is all that JavaScript is doing. And then everything else is just handled, again, with CSS. So I'm setting up what it should look like before the animation. So you can see here, opacity is set to 0, so it's hidden. There's a transform which pushes it down slightly, and then I set the transition. And then when the scrolled in class is added, the opacity changes to 1, the transform changes to 0, and it just scrolls in nicely. Cool thing about this is you can use that class to animate anything that is within the thing that the class has been added to. So you can affect any of the child items. It's pretty powerful and pretty simple, so it's just worked really well. Oh, and this is an example of the animations in action. So you can just see, hopefully, nice and subtle. Yeah, so that's it.
So one of the requirements was to have testimonials on the site. They wanted to have these on multiple pages, but they wanted like a common store of all the testimonials that they wanted to add. So they wanted somewhere where they could add all the testimonials from different people and so on. And then they wanted to be able to use those in different places. That's one of the examples where they wanted to be able to use them. So how do we deliver that? Again, we've got loads of options. We decided again on a custom block for testimonials, coupled with a custom post type. So they create testimonials as posts, and then they use the block type that we created here to display those on a page. They can display, depending on the listing type at the top, they can select specific testimonials that they want to bring in, or they can select the latest, which will bring like the latest 2 or 3, or they can select testimonials from specific groups. So they can group testimonials together. Maybe it's like a parents group, and then they can put those on a specific page using a custom block. And then we had this checkbox at the bottom, checkbox slider, to show slider if they wanted to do that, or they could show them in a grid or whatever. So that was quite nice and worked quite well. I think we've got a bit of time just to finish on some advice. Some of the things that we learned and advice perhaps we can pass on to you guys if you're having a go at this. First one is give it a go. If you've never used full site editing or modern kind of WordPress and the way we do this, it is worth giving it a go. It is a bit of a learning curve, but you can build a really successful website, both on the front end and the editing experience, using full site editing, the block editor. And the client, in this case, was more than happy with what they received. This is one of the quotes we received from them. And I think what was good with this client is that they actually added all their content themselves. So we showed them how to do it, don't get me wrong, we did some training, but all of the pages, and there were a lot, they added all themselves. And we were quite stunned, really, how easy that was for them to do and how they didn't mess it up. There were a few things we had to go and fix, but they did a really good job of it, and it was relatively straightforward for them. So, that's a sign that it's worth having a go at, and it is something you can be successful with. Use as much core WordPress as you can. So WordPress comes with loads of blocks out the box, and you can combine those quite well to do a lot of things. So I would recommend, don't just dive in for custom blocks all the time. You can use core blocks. That said, don't be afraid to use a custom block where you're struggling. We had lots of internal conversations about how do we do X and Y, and actually we shouldn't have wasted too much time and just decided on one of the methods we're going to use and run with it. And usually that ended up being a custom block because it was the easiest way to do it. And we decided on 2 of those for the cards and the testimonials. So as I said, try and use as much core as you can, but don't be afraid of using something custom, perhaps where it makes most sense. Learn CSS. A lot of what Keith's just been talking about goes way over my head. I don't know much about CSS. But if you're going to use core, can you work with the core markup? Can you do stuff with that core markup? And Keith's been amazing at doing all sorts of stuff with the core markup. That page tree menu is a great example. It's just a core block. It just drops a page just on the page, but we've managed to work with it to deliver what we needed to do. So I think if you can learn more advanced CSS, that will really help you work with those core blocks. And just get it done. And what does this mean? Well, as I said, we had so many conversations where we sort of got stuck on how to do something. There seems to be a bit of a lack of best practice out there for full site editing because it is relatively new. And where do we go for the best advice? And sometimes we found it's really hard to find the best advice because it hasn't yet been done yet. So, have a discussion, make a decision, and just go with it. Don't get too stuck on how to do something. And if that means you just end up falling back to something that you've done before, then that's fine for this point. You can always improve it later. But we found we got stuck on too many decisions and having too many internal, I won't say arguments, but discussions about how do we do something when we should have just got on with it the best way we could. So that's something to think about. Just a bit of a shameless plug before we finish. We have a little show called WP Cafe on a Friday afternoon. It won't be tomorrow because we're going home, but you'll get the idea. Where we just basically talk about this stuff we build, stuff we do, how we run our agency. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can find us on YouTube or at wpcafe.show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming. It's been great to be back and see so many of you come out to see and listen to both talks, which have been great. And if you've got any questions, we'll try our best to answer them, although, as I said, we might not necessarily have the answers.